Lucid Word, the author says, section 17, clarifying the integrals of prayer. The integrals of prayer are 17. The first integral is the intention in the heart to perform the prayer. Okay, so what's an integral? Integral means something that's a part of the deed, and without it, the deed is invalid. As opposed to a condition of the prayer, which is a prerequisite. Prerequisite means needs to be fulfilled before the prayer for the prayer to be valid, and last throughout the prayer too. Needs to be fulfilled before the prayer and then last throughout the prayer. Those are conditions, like making wudu and facing the qibla. The integrals of the prayer are the actual elements of the prayer itself. They are what make up the reality of the prayer itself. So that's going to be the takbir and the intention and the fatiha and the standing and the bowing and standing up and prostrating and sitting up. That's the prayer itself, the integrals of the prayer. So he says there are 17 of them. Yes, that's the strong saying in the Shafi'i school, 17. As opposed to what? As opposed to saying 13. When you say 13, why would you say 13? Because four parts of the prayer are not independent. 4 parts of the prayer are not independent. 4 parts of the prayer are integrated into other parts of the prayer, which is being still when you bow, being still when you stand back up, being still when you prostrate, and being still when you sit up. Those 4 instances of being still, if you count each one by one, then you'll get 17 integrals. And if you don't count any of them, then you'll get 13 integrals. And if you count all of them as one, then you'll get 14 integrals. The first integral is the intention in the heart to perform the prayer. The intention, that's an aim and a goal in the heart to perform the prayer. In the heart means doesn't have to be with the tongue. So that's why it says here, not uttering the intention with the tongue does not affect the validity of prayer, as long as the intention was established in the heart. The intention must coincide with the opening statement, Allahu Akbar. Coincide, yes, that means be simultaneous, be at the same time. And the scholar said, that's easy, that's not difficult. They said, that's easy to make the intention be at the same time as the takbir. That's not difficult. But exactly how is this? Does it have to be that from the time you say in Allahu till the time you say in Akbar, you have to have the intention through that whole time, all those letters? So some of them said, no, that's not a condition. As long as it's in such a way that a commoner, a layman, is considered to have intended at the same time as saying Allahu Akbar. Some of them said that's enough. It is mandatory to specify in one's intention the cause of prayer. If the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular cause. Okay. So it says here, let me read all of this and then I'll break it down for you. It says, it is mandatory to specify in one's intention the cause of prayer if the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular cause, such as the khusuf, eclipse prayer, or the istisqa, drought prayer, or else one must specify the time of prayer. If the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular time, such as Asr and Duha prayers, and it is a requirement to specify it being obligatory when it is so. Alright. So let me unravel that for you, insha'Allah ta'ala. So basically, when you intend, there are three issues you want to keep in mind: obligation, time, and occasion. Obligation, time, and occasion. So sometimes a prayer has any one of these or more than one at the same time. Sometimes it's obligatory, sometimes has a particular time, sometimes has a particular occasion. Occasion means something happened. Doesn't mean time here. So in these three, out of these three, obligation, time, and occasion, out of these three, there's two ways you're going to intend. If your prayer has any of these three, then there's two things you need to keep in mind for your intention. So there's three things, but there's two intentions here. One is the intention to fulfill an obligation. The intention to fulfill an obligation. Yani, one of them is targeting an obligation in your intention, targeting an obligation. So whenever a prayer is obligatory, then you have to target that obligation in your heart. The other thing is specifying the prayer that you're praying. Specifying in your intention the prayer that you're praying. Specifying the prayer that you're praying is going to be if the prayer has a special time or a special occasion. So that means, for example, Duha prayer has special time, which is in the morning, after sunrise, after the sun rises over the horizon, the height of a spear. That's when Duha time starts, and it lasts all the way until Dhuhr time. So it has a time. So then in your heart, you're going to say, now I pray Duha. Even though it's not obligatory, you need to specify the intent, the prayer. You need to specify the prayer in your intention. You need to target the exact prayer in your intention because it has a special time. And you're going to say, now I pray Witr. Although Witr is not obligatory, but it has a special time, which is after Isha until Fajr. Or you're going to say, now I pray eclipse prayer. Although eclipse prayer is not obligatory, but it has a special occasion, which is the occasion of the eclipse. So you have to specify the prayer in your intention. Or you'll say, now I pray drought prayer for the occasion. So if it has a time and it's obligatory, then you're going to target the obligation. So you're going to say, now I fulfill obligatory Asr prayer. Now I pray obligatory Asr prayer. Now I fulfill the obligation of Fajr prayer, for example. That's the synopsis of all of what I just read for you here. So I'll read it again and break it down for you, inshallah. Like funeral prayer, yes, funeral prayer has an occasion, which is the death of a Muslim. So you're going to say in your heart, now I pray obligatory funeral prayer, because it's a communal obligation. So you need to specify the obligation. So the author says here, it is mandatory to specify in one's intention the cause. Here, cause means occasion. The cause of prayer, if the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular cause, yani a particular occasion, such as eclipse prayer, solar or lunar eclipse. Khusuf here with kha, khusuf is lunar eclipse. But you can use the same word for either solar or lunar eclipse. Then could be argued that you don't need to squeeze this word in here like this. Solar eclipse is called kusuf with a kaf, kusuf. Lunar eclipse is called khusuf with a kha. So really here, in this basic obligatory knowledge book, this word here is not so important. It's not as important as just the English word eclipse prayer, solar or lunar, or drought prayer, or what someone might call rain prayer. That's an occasion. Or else one must specify the time of prayer. That's different from what I know. What does this say here? It says, if we just read the bold, the integrals of prayer are 17. The first integral is the intention in the heart to perform the prayer, to specify the cause, time of prayer, and to specify it being obligatory when it is so. Okay, so the way this is worded is different from how I know, which is, this is saying one must specify the time of prayer. No, what I know is one must specify the prayer if the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular time. One must specify in his intention the prayer itself. Yu'ayin as-salah. Yu'ayin as-salah. He specifies the particular prayer if it has a special time. Yani, if I take a look into the Arabic to see what's going on there. See this question here. It says specified time for lunar and eclipse prayer is occasion, not time. Eclipse is an occasion because don't know when it's going to happen. It doesn't have a special time. Just like funeral prayer. Funeral is an occasion. You don't know when it's going to happen. So it says here, وَيُعَيِّنُ فِي النِّيَّةِ الصَّلَاةَ. One specifies in his intention the prayer that the sabab, that has a particular reason, كالخسوف والاستسقاء, like eclipse and drought. Oh, that al-waqt, or the one that has time. So there's something missing there in the translation. Or one that has a time. So it's the prayer you're specifying, not the time itself. So it says here, or else one must specify. So let me just back up real quick here. So it is mandatory to specify in one's intention the cause, meaning the occasion of prayer, if the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular cause, occasion, such as the eclipse prayer or drought prayer. Or else one must specify the prayer that has a time. So, if the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular time. Okay, so I would say this needs to be fixed here. It's not something missing. Something's not translated right. Slightly. If the intended prayer is prayed on grounds of a particular time, such as Asr and Duha prayers. And it is a requirement to specify it being obligatory when it is so, meaning to target the obligation in your intention. Hence, on account of what was mentioned before, the valid intention, is, for example, I now pray the obligatory Asr prayer and the like. فتكون النية مثلا أصلي فرض العصر ونحو ذلك. Okay, so there's, I could pick at the translation slightly, mashallah. So hence, on account of what was mentioned before, here, this needs a comma. That's what threw me off. Hence, on account of what was mentioned before, comma, the valid intention is, for example, I now pray the obligatory Asr prayer, and the like. Okay, all clear. The second integral is to say Allahu Akbar loud enough to hear oneself, as is required in every verbal integral. such as Al-Fatiha and the last tashahhud. So, the second integral is to say Allahu Akbar loud enough to hear oneself, as is required in every verbal integral. So, the prayer has two types of integrals. It has verbal integrals and it has physical integrals. There's a condition for the verbal integrals, which is that you say them at least loud enough to hear yourself. When saying Allahu Akbar, one must not elongate the first letter in the name of Allah. I'd say give that a big N there. Name of Allah. The Hamza, so you say Allah. You can't say Allahu Akbar. That's not valid. Nor the letter Ba of Akbar. So you can't say Allahu Akbar. It's not valid. Also, one must not add the letter Wow before the word Allah. So you can't say Wallahu Akbar. Or between the word Allah and the word Akbar. So you can't say Allahu wa Akbar, wa Akbar. Not to say Allahu wa Akbar. It is also prohibited to replace the letter Hamza in the word Akbar with the letter Wow. So if you do that, fix that. Don't say Wakbar, Allahu Akbar. How someone would wind up doing that he's not separating the two words. So when you say who, your lips pucker for the oo sound. Allahu. And then if you say Akbar without from your throat, then you're going to wind up saying Wakbar, because your lips will pucker for saying who. And then you're just going to open back up when you want to say Akbar. So a person might say Allahu Akbar, wak. So don't say that. It's Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. One's prayer is legally not considered to have begun if the opening Allahu Akbar is misrecited in such a manner. Looks like there's supposed to be a space here. The third integral is to stand for the obligatory prayer. Yes, standing is an integral for the obligatory prayer. That's the exact integral. Not merely standing. Some books might say standing, and that's all they say. But what's most accurate is standing for obligatory prayer. As opposed to what? As opposed to voluntary prayer. It's not an integral to stand for the voluntary prayer. If a person prayed a voluntary prayer sitting or even laying down, it's valid even if he's able to stand. But if you pray sitting, you have half the reward of who prayed standing. And if you prayed laying down, you have half the reward of who prayed sitting. As for the obligatory prayer, you have no option if you're able to stand. And some people fall short here. In particular, some older folks might fall short here and sit down when they're able to stand. Or some folks who have some disability or amount of disability, but they are in reality able to stand and they sit down anyway. That's a problem. It's not valid. Al-Qiyamu fil fardi lil qadir. Standing in an obligation for the one who's capable. So that same one, if he goes to the market, can he stand in line and wait his turn? Or if he's waiting for the bus, he can stand and wait his turn? Wait for the bus, yani? Or the likes of that? Then he has to stand for his prayer. Even if the prayer were another vowed prayer, or perhaps a pledged prayer. What's that? That's when you make a pledge to do something that's not originally obligatory. It is originally recommended, and then you make a pledge to do it or a vow to do it. Then if your pledge is valid, it becomes obligatory on you to fulfill that. Like if you said, I pledge 2 rak'ahs, or I pledge myself to pray 2 rak'ats, or 4, for example. Then you have to pray 2 or 4. Or if you said, I pledge myself to pray Salatul Duha or Salatul Witr, then you have to now pray Duha or Witr. It becomes obligatory on you. Then by attaining this obligatory status, it will become a condition, not a condition, an integral. It will become an integral for you to stand in this prayer because it's obligatory. Or a funeral prayer, because that's a communal obligation. When one is able to stand, able means capable. This is done by standing on one's feet with one's spine upright. His spine, that means from his back, even if his neck is bent, but his spine is straight. Those who are unable to stand pray while sitting down. If unable to sit, here sitting down also originally means on the floor. Doesn't originally mean in a chair. If unable to sit, then they pray while lying down on their sides. Yani right side is preferable, but not obligatory. It's not a condition to lay on the right side. And if unable to do so, they pray while lying on their backs. That means their feet is towards the Qibla, and they have something to push up their chest so that their face will face towards the Qibla. And so that their faces won't be facing the sky. And if you can't do that, then you lay on your stomach with your face towards the Qibla. The fourth integral is to recite the surah, yani the Quranic chapter of Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha means the opener. It's the opening chapter of the Quran. So if the word chapter is here, it's probably not harmful. Just don't forget, when you put more and more non-English words in here, then you make it, you increase the chances of decreasing another person's understanding. So if this is an English document, you want to make it attainable. Depends on your goals. So if the goals here is this for this to be, let's say, above more basic, then okay, you can put those there. If the goal is for this to be basic, then better to just render these into English. Recite the chapter of Al-Fatiha. Take out these Arabic words in the middle of the sentences all over. You said when they lay on their sides, do they still face the Qibla? Yes. Laying on their side facing the Qibla with the chest. So the fourth integral is to recite the chapter of Al-Fatiha, whether one is the Imam, that means the leader of the prayer, or the Ma'mum, the follower of the prayer, the follower of the leader in the prayer, or praying alone. But they put the Arabic for Ma'mum and didn't put the Arabic for Imam. All of the verses of Al-Fatiha must be recited, including the Basmalah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, because it is the first verse of Al-Fatiha, according to Ash-Shafi'i. Not according to the other three Imams. The other three Imams don't deem the Basmalah a condition for the validity of your prayer. They said, there's two sayings about the Basmalah. Is it a verse of every chapter or not? So according to Ash-Shafi'i, it is a verse of every chapter of the Quran except Surah Bara'ah. And here, for example, they put the word verse, verses here, put the word verse, didn't put the word ayah. But up here, put the word surah and didn't put the word chapter. So if consistency is a concern, then it's important for a person to just stick to something that he can easily be consistent about. So if you write a book or something, you put some information together, the more things you throw in there, then you're going to have to keep track of consistency for yourself in your own work. So one might want to take some things out here just so that he doesn't have to worry about them not appearing in other places. Anyway, back to the topic here. All of the verses of Al-Fatiha must be recited, including the Basmala. So the Basmala is an ayah according to a saying of every chapter. It's a verse of every chapter, except Bara'ah. And according to another saying, it's not a verse of every chapter, but it is still a verse of the Quran. It's still a verse of the Quran. They say it's a verse of the Quran without being a part of any chapter of the Quran. Yani, it's individual. It's independent. They say the Basmala is a revealed verse of the Quran, and it's there for starting with it for blessings and for being a barrier between the chapters. And maybe you might hear some teachers say, some scholars said the Basmala is not an ayah of the Quran. So if you heard that statement, get that one checked there. What's in the tafsir of An-Nasafi is what I told you about the two sayings. Is it a verse of every chapter, or is not a verse of every chapter, but it's still a verse of the Quran though? And once I was in a lesson with a Shaykh, and he said, it's not a verse of the Quran according to the Hanafis. So I said to him, you mean it's not a verse of the chapter according to the Hanafis? He said, Quran, not a verse of the Quran. That's what he said to me. So I didn't say anything more. So he insisted. He's a good Shaykh too. But I don't pass that to the people because it's not verified for me that he's saying a right saying here. Now I'm telling you, but if I wasn't telling you this detail, I'll just tell you the first part. Some said it's a verse of every chapter, except Bara'ah. And some said it's not a verse of any chapter, though it's a verse of the Quran. Usually I'll just stop there. So, according to the Shafi'is, the Basmala, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, has to be recited because it is indeed the first verse of Al-Fatiha, just as it is the first verse of every surah of the Quran. So how do you spell that chapter? Here is surah right here written. If you see, they spelled it S-O-O-R-A-H. You could spell S-U-R-A-H if you want. Surah. Oh, Bara'ah. Bara'ah. So, it says, and doubling the letters which must be doubled. There are 14 doubled letters. Is there Fatiha in here? So, the way this work is done, I'm surprised there's not a transliteration of Al-Fatiha in the footnote. So there are 14 doubled letters. See if you can catch them with me as I recite slowly, insha'Allah ta'ala, and slightly exaggerate so you can catch the doubled letters. 14 of them. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. That's 3. الحمد لله رب العالمين. That's 2 more. الرحمن الرحيم. 2 more. مالك يوم الدين. That's another. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. That's 2 more. That's a total of 10 so far. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. That's another. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. That's 12. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. 13 and 14. If you miss any one of those doubled letters, if you missed it on purpose, your prayer is invalidated. If you missed it by mistake, you have to go back and fix it. It is also mandatory to maintain the succession. That means one after the next, one after the next, one ayah after the next, one ayah after the next, without long pauses in between. And order, sequence. That means you can't shuffle the ayahs. Shuffling the ayahs will invalidate your prayer if you do it on purpose. I.e., not to pause between the words of the Fatiha longer than one usually pauses to take a breath while speaking. Take a breath means catch your breath. To catch one's breath when speaking. It is also mandatory to articulate its letters properly. Articulate its letters properly doesn't mean perfectly. Properly means you need to get the letter from its spot. Ra, for example, comes from your tongue. Ra. And Sad comes from your tongue too. And Qaf comes from the back of your tongue too. Shuffle. Shuffle means take out of order. Take it out of order. Rearrange the order. The letter Sad deserves more attention than other letters. Yani, this is the one you need to be most keen about, owing to the abundant number of people who do not articulate it from its proper point of articulation. Rather, they pronounce it between the letter Sin and the letter Sad, i.e., not a pure Sin nor a pure Sad. Well, if someone did, it will invalidate his prayer. That's the important part there. If he shuffled the ayahs, this will invalidate his prayer. Simply, as soon as he puts one ayah ahead of its spot on purpose, he invalidated his prayer. It's not even going to be a matter of him switching all around. As soon as he puts the first ayah forward, out of its place, on purpose, he invalidated his prayer. And the person is required to avoid the error while reciting Al-Fatiha, which breaches the meaning. I would suggest here, where it says while reciting Al-Fatiha, I would suggest sliding this over to here. And then it would read like this. And the person is required, right, while reciting Al-Fatiha, to avoid the error which breaches the meaning. So not to separate this word which from the word error. The error which. To avoid the error which breaches the meaning of the verse, either by giving it a new and different meaning, such as applying the u and e vowels to the letter ta and the word an'amta, yani, like to say an'amtu or an'amti, because this changes the meaning. If someone said صِرَاطَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمْتُ عَلَيْهِمْ, then he's saying the path of those that I have bestowed on. And if he says an'amti, it means that you have bestowed, but they would be addressing Allah as a female. So it perverts the meaning. If someone did that on purpose, this will invalidate his prayer. If he did it by mistake, he just has to repeat. Or by making it meaningless, such as saying alladhina with the letter zay instead of the letter dhal. That means for a person to say allazina, allazina. Who does that? The lot of Pakistani community does that. Probably Pakistani, Indian, maybe, I don't know if Bengali community also does that. So avoid that. If you're part of that community, or you know some of the brothers and sisters there and you catch them like that, then help them. Alladhina, not allazina. The error that does not breach the meaning is sinful. However, it does not invalidate the prayer. Such as applying the E vowel to the letter noon in the word na'budu. Yani saying ni'budu. If someone said ni'budu, it's still valid. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. And we'll save the rest of this until next week if Allah gives us the life.